Labas rytas.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, members of the Seimas, everyone who has gathered to the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania to take part in the discussion with our keynote speaker, Andrei Illarionov, who kindly accepted our invitation to take part in the discussion and to speak on the topic. I will say a few words about Mr. Illarionov. He is a famous political analyst in the Russian Federation. He had a very high position. Previously, he graduated from economic studies. He worked in the Leningrad University International Economy Faculty. Then he was advisor to Mr. Yegor Gaidar. Then he worked in the Viktor Chernomyrdin government since 2000. He was a chief economic advisor to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Well, you all know the reasons why he resigned in 2005. He expressed his position. He drew the dividing lines between his opinion and the policy carried out by Vladimir Putin. Since 2006, Mr. Illarionov has worked as a senior fellow at the Cato Institute Center. He often attends various conferences. He speaks on such subjects as economy, politics, various problems related to Russia. Participation of Mr. Illarionov in the spring session of NATO Parliamentary Assembly that was held in May in Vilnius was also very popular. And I very much hope that you will be glad to listen to his ideas today. Now, as far as the arrangement for today is concerned, I would like to say that Mr. Illarionov will speak for about 30 minutes, and later on you will have time for question and answer session. I'm looking forward to very interesting discussions, and now I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Illarionov. I welcome you once again to Lithuania, and I have to admit that your visits are always pleasant to us. I hope that this is not your last visit in Lithuania. You are always welcome in Lithuania. Mr. Andrei, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Petras, for this very kind introduction. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would start my comments with two apologies. First of all, I would like to apologize that due to this event, you've been taking from your much more important duties, obligations, and maybe interests, and spend this July morning, hot morning in Vilnius, discussing this probably not the most pleasant issue that we could find in our agenda. Second, I have to say that I'm not a military specialist. I'm an economist by training, and I spent most of my time doing economic analysis and economic consulting and economic recommendations. So that is why if something in my coming remarks would not be strictly according to the military terminology, I apologize, but sometimes in our life we find ourselves in a situation that we need to deal with new challenges, with new issues, even we are not fully educated in those issues, but those issues do have extremely important meaning and extremely important weight in our everyday life. So that is why we need to concentrate, and we need to maybe relocate our interests on new issues. The topic of our meeting today is non-linear war. So we will be talking about the war, which have this particular title. And today, July 28th, year 2014, looks like it's rather symbolic day, because today, exactly today, 100 years ago, there was the beginning of the First World War. So probably Aeroflot company, some kind of lost our luggage on purpose just to give a chance to speak here exactly this Monday, not day early, not day later. So coming to the topic, first of all about terminology. You can find several terms that are used as synonyms, like non-linear war, hybrid war, non-conventional war, new generational war or warfare, a war of new type, and so on. So just I am using them like synonyms. I think it's interchangeable. Probably some military specialists would find something special, but I would use it like this. Also, this discussion about non-linear war can be rather general. Concerns a number of military conflicts that already happened, or is underway, or is probably coming, but also those terms are being used in relation with the concept of either Third World War, or Fourth World War, or Fifth World War, depending on the author, depending on how different authors calculate what the Third World War like, Cold War, whether it is a fourth or fifth or so on. My second point is about authors of this non-linear or hybrid war or non-conventional war or new generational warfare. It became very widely known that the term non-linear war has been introduced for general public by the publicist known in Russia and outside Russia as well, Nathan Dubovitsky, in his short story Without Sky, about, according to him, Fifth World War, which was waged by everybody against everybody. And probably some of you know that real name of the author Nathan Dubovitsky is Vladislav Surkov, and Nathan Dubovitsky is his pseudonym that he's using in producing some kind of stories and verses and songs and so on. He's a very talented person, so he likes to write, not only for his boss, but only for his pleasure. So it has been presented, even just such a respectable magazine like The Economist gave the credit for creation of this term to Mr. Surkov, kind of in his under name of Nathan Dubovitsky. In reality, certainly not Mr. Surkov is the author either of this term or this concept. The real author of this term and the concept is the General Staff of the Russian military forces. And this is really some kind of the brain behind this concept, and behind not only the theoretical concept, but also behind the implementation of this theoretical concept in different military theaters, including the current one that attracted a lot of attention in Ukraine. I would like to to spend some time, those of you who are interested in this topic in more details, to look into the speech of Valery Gerasimov, chief of the General Staff of the Russian military forces, in January 2014, the meeting of the Academy of Military Science. It is a rare case that his speech, at least some of that speech, has been published in open press. in which Mr. Gerasimov is discussing the new methods, a new type of war in which the world and Russia are going to be engaged. I would mention some main messages that you can find in this speech. The most important characteristics of this new war, non-linear war, is blurring the borders between war and peace. If before, and especially now, we know that the war has been declared, as it was in July 28, 1914, or later. So now wars are not declared, and they have been started, have been launched without official and public declaration of military actions. And actually some military conflicts like Russian-Georgian War of year 2008 was exactly like this. Those new wars are being launched and conducted, but not according to the old standards of military operations. They are using intensively experience accumulated in guerrilla warfare and in colored revolutions, mostly not in Europe, but in our world and in some other places. Another very important characteristic, it's a very wide use of non-military means, political, economic, especially informational, humanitarian means in achieving political and strategical targets. Also a very important element of this so-called not strictly military warfare is using mass protest of civilian population, civilian disobedience, and political oppositions in targeted countries. At some point, all these means are being added with military actions. First of all, of hidden character, especially if and when the special forces, spetsnaz, are being employed, and including terrorist acts in view of the shooting and hitting of the Boeing 777 departing from Amsterdam on July 17th. It became very clear how widely and seriously terrorist actions can be used in achieving the political and strategic purposes. And at some final stage, maybe not final, but in some crucial stage when necessary environment has been created, use of open military actions, mainly to achieve the final success. And it is very important. It's happening not only in the type of in the form of the front attack, but in the form of peacekeeping operation. Another element in this warfare is wide use of these asymmetrical actions. Some of them I've already mentioned, like spetsnaz, terrorist acts, guerrilla warfare, irregular forces, domestic political oppositions, and so on. Wide use of new technology and new equipment. That's probably not something new for the audience, because it's like from drones to computers to some kind of precise weaponry and so on. Another very important element that military operations began beyond national borders, often at far distance. Exclusive role is given to peacekeeping operations. So peacekeeping operations that have been designed by United Nations and by international community as a means of producing peace and some kind of stopping the military acts. In this concept, peacekeeping operations are being used for launching military operations, for achieving political targets. Another element which is openly included into this concept is so-called preventive actions, so-called not fully legal removal or destruction of leaders, political, military, irregular forces on the foreign territory. At the same time, the attacking country should ensure the strictest control of their own border. Now I would mention some of elements from Mr. Gerasimov and General Staff comments how this concept is being considered from theoretical point of view. Military actions starts by groups of troops during peacetime. War is not declared at all. Second, non-contact clashes between highly maneuverable interspecific fighting groups versus some kind of frontal clashes between large units, as it was during the First World War, Second World War, Korean War, even Vietnam War. Annihilation of the enemy's military and economic power by short-time precise strikes in strategic military and civilian infrastructure. We have seen it in the Russian-Georgian War. We have not seen it yet until recent attacks on Ukrainian troops on the border during this Russia-Ukrainian war. Very wide use of armed civilians or irregular forces or guerrilla warfare. Simultaneous strikes on the enemy units and facilities in all of the territory of the country, especially it had been seen during the Russian-Georgian War. Simultaneous battle on land, air, sea, and in the informational space. Again, it was in the case of Russian-Georgian War, partially in Russian-Ukrainian War. In terms of informational space, we have seen it during the conflict in cyberspace against Estonia in year 2007. Use of asymmetric and indirect methods, and very special elements of management of troops in a unified informational sphere. So this theoretical explanation has been supported by these particular ideas. So enemy's troops should be engaged in a way that would be not direct destructions, immediate destruction as it was before, to direct influence and some kind of breaking enemy's psychology and enemy morale. That is considered to be the most important. Instead of immediate direct annihilation of the opponent to its inner decay. From a war with weapons and technology to a culture war, to a psychological war, to propaganda war, to information war. From a war with conventional forces to specially prepared forces and commercial irregular groupings. From direct clashes to contactless war. From a superficial war to a total war, including the enemy's internal site, bases, and so on. From war in the physical environment to a war in the human consciousness and a cyberspace. From symmetric to asymmetric warfare to a combination of political, economic, information, technological, and ecological campaigns. From war in a definite period or defined period of time to a state of permanent war, the natural conditions of national life. So, and the main stages of this new generation warfare can be schematized as follows. First phase, and actually we have seen a lot of this already in Ukraine, or in the war against Ukraine. The first phase, non-military asymmetric warfare, encompassing information, moral, psychological, ideological, diplomatic, economic measures as part of a plan to establish a favorable political, economic, and military environment. Second phase, special operations to mislead political and military leaders by coordinating measures carried out by diplomatic channels, media, top government and military agencies by leaking false data, orders, directives, and instructions. Third phase, intimidation, deceiving, bribing government and military officers with the objective of making them abandon their services duties. That was very widely used in Ukraine, and many government and military officials have became victims and targets of this particular phase. Fourth phase, destabilizing propaganda to increase discontent among the population, especially boosted by arrival of Russian groups of militants, escalating subversions on the territory of the targeted country. Fifth phase, which we have not seen yet, but it is included as a theoretical base. Establishment of no-fly zones of the country to be attacked, imposition of blockades, and extensive use of private military companies in close cooperation with armed opposition units. Six, commencement of military action immediately preceded by large-scale reconnaissance and subversive missions. Seventh phase, combination of targeted information operations, electronic warfare operation, aerospace operation, continuous Air Force harassment combined with the use of high-precision weapons launched from various platforms, including long-range artillery, weapons-based, new physical principles, microwave radiations, biological weapons, and so on. Eighth phase, roll over the remaining points of resistance and destructions of surviving enemy units by special operations conducted by reconnaissance units to spot which enemy units have survived and transmit their coordinates to the attacker's missile and artillery units. Fire barrages to annihilate the defenders' resisting army units by effective advanced weapons, and so on. So that's a pretty developed concept of this non-linear war. And as I would probably repeat again, the point that I've made earlier when we've met at the NATO parliamentary session here in Vilnius, what we're seeing right now is not a Cold War. It cannot be called as a Cold War because the methods that are being used here is very far from cold, and they are intended to achieve global strategic targets, strategic purposes. So in any case, when we're discussing this, whether it's a linear war or non-linear war or elements of different wars, we need to understand the purpose of the war that has been launched, again, almost exactly 1 year ago, on July 27th, year 2013, just 1 year and 1 day ago, in Kyiv, in a speech of Mr. Putin to both Russian and Ukrainian audience in honor of the 1025th anniversary of the baptism of Kievan Rus. So it's a very important element because it's an ideological component of this war, restoration of the so-called Russian world, Ruski Mir. It's a kind of a unification under one government roof, all Russian people by ethnic origin, all Russian-speaking people, regardless of their ethnicity, all people who ever lived on the territory of the former Soviet Union or their offsprings, and all people who ever lived on the territory of the Russian Empire and their offsprings. At least all these four categories are included into the law that has been adopted by the State Duma of the Russian Federation under the term соотечественники, compatriots. And соотечественники deserve to be protected by all means, including military means, including beyond national borders of the Russian Federation. So that is why this element is very important. It's also an element of this cultural difference. They always try to underline cultural difference between so-called Russian Orthodox world that sustain the real values of humanity versus decaying West, especially some Anglo-Saxon world, that those values cannot be protected. So this current war that has been launched by Mr. Putin 1 year and 1 day ago has at least 3 basic levels and 3 main targets. At this moment, the most attention is being concentrated on Ukraine. And the strategic goal of this campaign is that Ukraine must not leave the Russian sphere of so-called privileged interests, the concept that has been also widely known since at least July 2008, since it has been put into the concept of foreign policy doctrine of the current Russian regime. And Ukraine must not join the Western alliances, regardless whether economic ones and especially security alliance. That is why Ukraine must be under Mr. Putin's control, or if Ukrainians' decision would be different, it should be destroyed as independent and sovereign state. So this is the first level in this concept. Second level is the creation of the so-called Russian world that I mentioned earlier. All these соотечественники, all these compatriots should be united under this roof, and the so-called largest divided nation of the world, Russians. This is a quotation from the speeches of some Russian leaders, including Mr. Putin. That's a direct borrowing from speeches of Nazi propaganda machine in the 1930s, and of Hungarian fascists of the same time about the divided nations, and of Mr. Milosevic of 1990s. So now it is for the first time it is being applied to the Russians. And unfortunately now it's not only some kind of, this concept of the Russian world is not only some kind of fantasy written by strange and weird people. This is some kind of the official policy that is being conducted by the Russian regime. But there is another level. So the first level can be considered regional, the war against Ukraine. Even the creation of Russian world could be considered as a macro-regional level, so it does not affect the whole world. But the third level of this war is the whole world, with its target is the Western alliance. According to this concept, the Western alliance, and first of all the Western security alliance, must be broken into 2 camps. The first one is the Anglo-Saxon world plus France states. In Anglo-Saxon world, they include US, Canada, UK, probably as we have now Australia also there, and probably the Netherlands, plus France states, where this place is occupied by 3 Baltic states and Poland. The other part of the Western Alliance is the so-called continental Europe, that is, according to the authors of this concept, is managed mostly by Germany, and that is why the purpose is some kind of to divide this divide the alliance into 2 camps. It is impossible to achieve any agreement, any peace with Anglo-Saxon world, but it is possible to achieve at least neutrality, or maybe at some point even status of allies from the part of the continental Europe. I am putting aside my comments or analysis or my reaction to this. I'm just giving the facts according to the logic of those people who developed this particular concept. Some elements of this hybrid war, on linear war, on conventional war that we already seen, both in cases of the Russian-Georgian war and Russian-Ukrainian war. Some element that I would like to comment in more details. Intelligence. It was very clear that intelligence was collecting for a long time, for many years, and key figures of the Russian forces who emerged later, like Mr. Girkin, as the leader of these military operations, have traveled to Ukraine many times, especially in the delegation of the Russian Orthodox Church, accompanying the Russian Patriarch Kirill and other church officials. So that is why it's another element just to look into how different agents, not only military agents, not only military subjects, not only state subjects, but non-military, non-state subjects, including civilians, including business people, including church people, including different type of companies, are being used in collecting information and in conducting subversive actions and even military actions as well. Counterintelligence on the part of the Western Alliance happened to be not at very high level, and I would like to mention several very clear and very painful mistakes that have been visible over the last few years. Just through all July year 2008, Georgian officials, including President of Georgia Mikhail Saakashvili, were informing Western Alliance, NATO, OEC, just particular organizations and personalities about the concentration of Russian forces on the Russian-Georgian border. All of this information have been disregarded by American and Western officials with high people, including the Secretary of State of the United States, saying that, okay, we know Russians, they will never intervene you. So, and when the real intervention on mass scale has been studied, so it took United States by surprise. So the intelligence was not able to supply any information, neither before attack, nor even after attack. When Georgian asked for satellite photos of the concentration of the intervention, United States did not possess such documents. This year, something similar happened just one day before of the Crimean open intervention. On February 26, the U.S. Intelligence community published a report saying that some kind of military activities on the Russian side does not mean that Russia is going to attack and occupy either part of Ukraine. Next day, Russian troops stormed the building in Simferopol of the Supreme Council, and the hidden part of the military operation from the Russian side that started actually 7 days before, on February 20th, became visible to anyone in the world, to millions of people. So the U.S. intelligence was not able to detect neither hidden part of this, not almost even a visible part. One more element that even also just showing what kind of instrument have been used. In mid-April, year 2014, Russian regime started disseminate rumors and disinformation about immediate attack of the Russian troops and crossing the Russian-Ukrainian border and attack on Kiev. So, and they have achieved such effect that for example, very well-known person like Dmitro Timchuk, who is one of the some kind of leading voices in explaining disinformation on the Russian side, also got in trap and also said that, okay, we're expecting intervention from the Russian troops within 48 hours. Another person, Mr. Marchuk, who was the Minister of Defense of Ukraine, who was the head of the Security Council of Ukraine, who was the head of KGB of Ukraine, and so on, also made a statement that produced a very some kind of strong shockwaves in the Ukrainian society, saying that in 48 hours, Russian troops are going to cross the Ukrainian border. The effect of this disinformation campaign was such strong that whole Kiev has been deserted. There was almost no people there. The economic life and political life and kind of has been paralyzed, and there was no intervention from the Russian troop. So that is why there are different ways to influence internal political, economic life of the targeted country can be used to destabilize and to destroy either economy or psychology or morale or all of them. Cyber war. We have seen how the cyber war has been used against Estonia in year 2007, against Georgia in year 2008, when almost all websites of government bodies and organizations have been paralyzed by cyber attacks during the war. Wide use of special forces and commanders of different types. We have seen has been achieved in Crimea, that the whole peninsula has been occupied by special forces, rather effective, rather organized, very well trained, very well equipped. Less known the role of the special forces in the launching of the Russo-Georgian War just large-scale Russian-Georgian War in August 2008. The special unit of Russian Special Forces of GRU, the 10th Brigade of Spetsnaz, has been placed in Tskhinvali in the camp of the Russian peacekeepers. They occupied the main, the most important, the most serious barrack, three-stop building in the center of this camp, while peacekeepers have been pushed to other places. And in the night of from August 7th to August 8th of year 2008, this unit of GRU, of 10th Brigade of Spetsnaz of GRU, played a very special role in launching the attack. As you probably know, the beginning of these some kind of large-scale hostilities was due to attack of the South Ossetian mortar artillery on the Georgian troops that led to a number of some kind of more than 3 dozen wounded Georgians, and the aim was to provoke the response with fire to the position, because South Ossetians launched their attack from the position of Russian peacekeepers. So if Georgians would respond with fire, so would definitely attack Russian peacekeepers. That would be the pretext for the full-scale operations. Georgians did not respond, even they suffered serious casualties. So then Mr. Medvedev called at 2 in the morning, but not to the Russian peacekeeping camp in Tskhinvali, but to the commander of this unit, of 107th unit of this brigade, asking why there is no response from the Georgian troops. So the response was that, okay, so they do not respond. Okay, the order was, okay, to intensify fire from the South Ossetian troops, that Georgians would respond. On 4 in the morning, Medvedev called again, asking what is the situation on the ground. And the response was, again, there is no some kind of fire from the Georgian position. Then, 7 in the morning, not Mr. Medvedev, but Mr. Putin called from Beijing, once again, to this 107th unit of Spetsnaz. We can have some guess what kind of discussion was that time. But 30 minutes later, this unit of Spetsnaz started fire against Russian peacekeepers. As a result of this fire, one of the officers of Russian peacekeepers has been killed, and another one was wounded. After that, the Russian side has received so-called material confirmation of the death of Russian peacekeepers. They claim that it was from the Russian fire, and after that they claim that, okay, this is a basis, some kind of so-called legal basis for mass-scale intervention through the Russian-Georgian border. In fact, the Russian troops already crossed the border, but they needed some kind of legal pretext for this operation. Once again, it shows what role can be assigned to such a special forces, to such commanders, in launching and in sustaining particular military campaign. Another point, as I mentioned already, but I would repeat again because it's very important, because it changes our understanding what kind of war is it. It's a wide use of the so-called non-government actors, including business, NGOs, religious organizations, criminals, private persons, that are acting relatively independently, but under the overall guidance and centralized command. This is a so-called the term of the third force. When I studied the Russian-Georgian War, and I have intensive interviews with OEC officers located in South Ossetia of different nationalities, and we're trying to restore some kind of what happened before the launch of hostilities on August 7th. So they told me the story that they didn't understand initially, but started to understand it later. So in July year 2008, they have detected appearance on the theater, on the military theater, what they called the third force. So before that, as probably some of you know who followed these events, there was a regular, with some breaks, some kind of exchange of fires between South Ossetians and Georgians troops and some kind of irregular units and so on. And each time when such exchange of fire happened, so the officers of OEC missions moved to that place, to this site, some kind of collected evidence, and after that they kind of prepared reports and informed, okay, in this case, okay, South Ossetians started the fire, Georgians responded, there were so many casualties, so many wounded, they some kind of produced reports sending to all sides and so on. Next time, okay, that's Georgian started, so the South Ossetian responded, okay, they prepared report to send to all interested sides. But in July year 2008, they detected that, okay, there is a kind of exchange of fire, they're moving to the site, and all of a sudden they found that this particular exchange did not happen because neither South Ossetians started this exchange, nor Georgians. When they found the first time, they were complete mystery because they could not explain what happened. But when those cases became quite regularly, they said, all right, that's arrival of the so-called third force. And when I asked, okay, what is the third force? Because first of all, I did not buy it because I said that, okay, it's just another military anecdotes, some kind of generals or officers some kind of trying to produce impression on civilians. But they said, okay, we are sure that is the Russian forces. And actually, he didn't tell me, he showed with his eyes on the map where was the Russian Federation. And I said, okay, I cannot buy it, it's completely impossible. He said, okay, you will study more, you will understand it. So something similar we have seen very recently during the hitting of this Malaysian jet, the Boeing, that officially it looks like the two sides, again separatists, in this case not South Ossetian, but so-called Donbass or Donetsk or Luganda, whatever, and Ukrainian regular forces. And the whole terrorist act is presented in such a way that is some kind of the guilt should be going either on one side or on the other side. And we all witness how different some kind of participants trying to play this role. But in reality, as we have studied and we have learned, it has not been neither Ukrainians, it's very obvious, and now there a lot of evidence that Ukrainians are not involved in that, but not even separatists in eastern Ukraine involved in that. Yes, this is true. It was done on the territories controlled by separatists, as it was many of these terrorist acts in South Ossetia happened on the territories controlled by South Ossetian separatists. As it was in the case in Abkhazia, many terrorist acts happened on the territory controlled by Abkhazian terrorists, separatists. But in reality, those terrorist acts have been conducted by very special, very well-trained groups from the Russian side, from the regular Russian troops who performed this operation. Probably I will say a few words about this jet, maybe here, just maybe not come back to this point again. This is a very important element because even as we know, the United States intelligence said that, okay, they have no evidence that the official Russian forces are involved, which another already at least forced example of failure of US intelligence. And I would not very much be surprised if at some point somebody will find another Aldrich Ames in the US intelligence community. But what is really important, that such a powerful weapon as book anti-aircraft cannot be given to any separatist. We have studied the cases of, for example, South Ossetian War, some kind of Abkhazian operations. None of really powerful weapons was ever given to separatists by the Russian army. Even Grads have not been given to separatists. All these Grads have been under control of the regular Russian troops at all times. Book anti-aircraft weapons of incredibly much more powerful compared to Grad or compared to Uragan systems. So it's absolutely implausible that such a powerful system would be given to anyone under any control and under any command except of the Russian regular forces. What we know also that this system has been moved to east of Ukraine in the early morning of July 17th, actually crossed the border at 1 a.m., 1:05 a.m. So it has been detected at 9 a.m. in Donetsk. It has been detected at about midday, about noon, in Snizhnoye. And about 1 hour and 1.5 hours later, it took position in the field south of Snizhnoye, exactly under the very well known and very widely used international air route L980 that is being used by not only this jet of Malaysian Airlines but many other airlines. Actually, daily about 4 dozens of passenger jets are crossing the sky over Donetsk and Lugansk. None of them have been hit. And even at the moment when this jet has been hit by missile from Buk, in the sky there were 3 other passenger jets. One of them was from Singaporean Airlines, flying from Copenhagen to Singapore. Another was from 20 minutes before Lufthansa, and another one from Indian company. So just none of them have been hit. Why? The reason as now, so before we have facts, now we have only speculations. We have some kind of hypothesis why this flight has been taken. It's not because of Malaysia Airlines. It was because of the fact that a plane departed from Amsterdam. And there are a number of explanations that have been put forward, starting from some kind of personal humiliation given to Mr. Putin because Mayor of Amsterdam has refused to have some kind of official reception during the visit of Mr. Putin to Amsterdam a year ago, to the concept of this Russian world or Russian Orthodox values, according to which Amsterdam is the capital of European scene or capital of gay Europa, as they used to say, or to some other reasons, or even probably some people would link to the today's announced decision of the court in The Hague concerning the Yugos. Whatever the actual reason or combination of reasons, it was very clear that this flight has been chosen on purpose. No other planes have been selected, and as soon as this hit has been performed, this system has been relocated to Russian territory, and same late evening it left Ukrainian territory. If this system would be under the control of separatists, they would never allow the system leave this territory. They always claim that they are under permanent attack of Ukrainian aviation, and that is why they need this system to protect their sky. So it was very clear that this system arrived in Donetsk Oblast according to the order given from the Russian military forces, performed their business according to the order from the Russian military forces, and left the territory of Ukraine according to the order from the Russian military forces. I'm going to some other elements. I don't know how much time do I have? 5:10. All right. Okay. I would probably some of this is probably not so important, except maybe a couple of others. A very important role is being played by the so-called the fifth column. It is fifth column, the same kind of the groups of people and personalities, especially important and who have control of important administrative functions in Ukraine, in other post-Soviet states, and in the West, including Europe. Another element is the so-called Putin-Tern, or the Putin International, a combination of different political parties, politicians that are being supported by Mr. Putin and who are supporting Mr. Putin. One of the most important observations of this unconventional warfare that there is no more clearly defined and visible geographical, political, or military borders. Putin then could include some kind of right parties and right politicians, and left party and left politicians, and so on. Some of actually very well-known figures did participate in support and in of Putin's actions against Ukraine. I would mention at least such names like Henry Kissinger and former Czech President Václav Klaus, who have published at least a dozen different statements, interviews, defending fully Putin's actions, justifying Russia's annexation of Crimea, and putting the blame on European Union and United States for this. And a couple of words about Putin's style in this new war. It is so-called adherence to formal legalism. You remember that Mr. Putin mentioned many times the legal status of Mr. Yanukovych as the formal president of Ukraine, even he departed from the territory of Ukraine on February 23rd. The importance of so-called occupandum, or referendum, that has been organized by the Russian forces or under the protection of the Russian troops in Crimea. The Russian State Duma decision to give Putin right to intervene in Ukraine, and so on. Another very important element of Putin's style is the so-called escalation of demands that leads to the change of the agenda. We have seen how it has worked in Syria. As you remember, 1 year ago, after almost 3 years of civil war in Syria, Western governments were preparing to intervene, and the United States was even going to strike on some targets in Syria. Then Bashar Assad troops used chemical weapons and thousands of civilians died. That case, that fact, has been used by Putin, who stepped in to broker a so-called solution to this problem. There were the negotiations. Assad gave up chemical weapons, but instead became a party of the negotiations, and has been legalized by Western negotiation process. So, as a result, US backed away from airstrikes in Syria, and who is now still reigning in Damascus? Mr. Putin's ally, Bashar Assad. In Ukraine, something very similar has happened. First of all, Putin started the sanitary, trade, economic, and financial war without any justification. That led to recession and stagnation in Ukrainian economy. After that, Putin has changed agenda by forcing Yanukovych to reject the agreement with the European Union, And that became more important than even economic downturn in Ukrainian economy. When people went into Maidan protesting this turnaround in the Ukrainian foreign policy, Putin has again changed the agenda by instigating adoption of draconian laws by the Ukrainian parliament on January 16, 2014, and use of brutal police force against demonstrators. When people rose against those draconian laws and brutal violence, Putin has again changed the agenda by instigating mass murder of the Sky 100 on Maidan. When the new government started investigation of this mass murder, Putin has again changed the agenda by snatching Crimea from Ukraine. When the public attention was attracted to Crimea, Putin has changed the agenda by launching the destabilization of the south and east of Ukraine. When Ukraine and the world were dealing with atrocities in eastern Ukraine, Putin has again changed the agenda by massing troops on the Russian-Ukrainian border and threatening to intervene directly on mass scale. When some Western leaders were issuing the 1,001st warning not crossing the 2,002nd red line, Putin has changed the agenda again by sending militants and weapons to Donbass. When Ukraine started to deal with that problem, Putin has again changed the agenda by shooting Ukrainian troops from the Russian territory with grads and raguns. When the world was not even ready to react appropriately to that new challenge, there was a terrorist act with shooting down a passenger jet with 300 innocent lives. And now everybody in the world are discussing, okay, how can we stop terrorist acts, not putting attention even to what is going on in the east of Ukraine. So there's the same approach, some kind of escalating problems, escalating demands, as a result of which all previous happen to be paling in comparison. So what is the response to this non-linear war? It's a big discussion. It cannot be done here, but I would mention some of them. First of all, it is necessary to recognize and understand, and just in open and publicly, this is a war. It's not a joke. It's not some kind of preparation. It's a real war. And this is a war has several levels, stages. If this war and the aggressor is not stopped at these early stages, it will be second stage, it will be third stage, it will be next stage until all these targets of this war will be achieved. Second, it is a very important element of this non-linear war. I'm putting aside military component because there are some kind of military specialists and professionals who are dealing with it appropriately. What is important element is the information war. Those who are conducting this information war, they are not journalists. They are information troops. And that's a very important element because many of us do consider journalism, at least in the some kind of free part of the world, as journalism, as a profession that collects information and produces the most objective, some kind of, as to what extent it's possible, objective information. It's a different story for those people who are working on the side of the aggressor. They're distorting information. They're producing disinformation. They're producing lies. Ukrainian website InfoResist has published some time ago the collection of the 20 lies of Putin propaganda against Ukraine, which shows how sophisticated the approach of those information troops, because they're using footage, video, photo materials that collected from Dagestan 5 years ago, from Syria 3 years ago, from Bashkortostan 10 years ago, from some other places in different time in different places. If you are not specialist in those materials, if you have no enough time and resources, you just cannot identify the document. And they're very good on that. But they prepared, first of all, these 20 documents. A couple of weeks later, they produced 40 new lies. After that, 60 new lies. After that, 70 new lies. And they're working like a real machine. If you don't have such a machine, if you do not have people regardless whether they are on the kind of a government payroll or that's a private company, you cannot sustain this information war. Because this information war has aimed, first of all, on the Russian population, on the population of the targeted country, and the population around the world. If you do not produce counter evidence, millions of people around the world started to think that is truth. And that is why population of even those countries that are not targeted yet, they're going to to be loyal to the interpretation of the one that is produced by the aggressor. It's absolutely new situation that probably we never had before, and just these danger, these threats should be understood appropriately. And my last point would be here that because it's according to the authors of this concept and of this implementation of this nonlinear war, is not several months, it's not even a year, not several years. It's a long-term campaign with a long-term and very ambitious targets. So that is why the final victory in the war can be achieved only if the aggressor will cease to become an aggressor. And that can happen only if Russia will become a democratic country. There is a theory that actually looks like confirmed by the evidence of the last century that democratic countries do not fight each other. The only way to stop this aggressive, revisionist and revanchist behavior is just to achieve democratic status for Russia. Thank you.
Didelis ačiū Andrejau už
Thank you, Andrei, for a very comprehensive presentation, for very well thought arguments and conclusions that you have presented during your presentation. We have some time for the discussion. Before you raise your question, please introduce yourself. I've already received one question on the internet, but we'll begin with the Lithuanian media representatives. Kristina Jaskūnaitė from LRT.
Ask what should Europe and United States of America do today, talking about situation in Ukraine, and what should be done to stop Vladimir Putin today and this week? Thank you.
Okay, I tried to actually to put forward some of my points, that was, I would say, initial elements. Strictly speaking, it's necessary to address each of the directions or each of the elements of the non-linear war. Starting from recognition that it's a war, and it is a war not only against Ukraine. It's a war against these kind of Western values of Western world. It's not some kind of, once again, it's not a fantasy of some kind of weird people. It's an official policy. So that is why it should be understood that these actions of different kind, direct military actions or information or psychological warfare, are directed on the Western world. That should be understood first. Second, as I said, immediate step, something with information, whatever, information counter troops or whatever. 5 months ago, I believe it was 5 months ago, early March, I was speaking with Ukrainian officials. It was probably some kind of March 3rd or March 4th, just very, very beginning. And I said to them that the very first thing that you need to to create whatever, some kind of information center that who would be dealing with journalists, with media companies, with professionals to provide them with information, with briefings, what available to officials. That time, Ukrainians did not understand it completely, and they say, why should we do it? It's not our business, we're not going to do it. Okay, but you don't understand the essence of this new warfare, because this is the most important warfare that affects your own population, your own troops, your own military units, your own security forces, your own police or militia, whatever. Just if you would not some kind of react on all this campaign of disinformation, it's a matter of time when your own population has changed views, as we have seen in Russia, because it's probably the most massive brainwashing campaign that have been undertaken in Russia, not only behind the closed doors, not only behind the Iron Curtain, as we have seen back some kind of 60 years ago, but under some called so transparent borders, information borders. There is no problem to some kind of to get information from any sources. Nevertheless, if majority of population are being some kind of open to the some kind of brainwashing campaign 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to some kind of to first of all to television and to some other mass media resources, it's striking how it is possible to change some kind of psychology, individual psychology and mass psychology of population. So that's kind of the starting points. And the some kind of third points is just the military. I'm not going to some kind of to comment on this, but it's quite clear all was finally either lost or won by military forces. Just I'm stopping here because it's just some other people some kind of have better views what to do and how to do it, but it's quite clear without it's impossible. And the fourth point is once again, it is necessary to keep in mind the long-term targets. In this probably long-term campaign, Russia must be democratic. Russia must be free. Without achieving that particular target, we unfortunately will be facing all the time with some kind of these outbreaks of revisionism, of revanchism, of new military campaigns on any directions.
Sure.
Victoria Rinkevičiūtė, could you evaluate the recent sanctions by European Union and the US to Russia? Will they actually have an impact on the Russian economy? And wouldn't the sanctions have a never impact on the European Union that is highly dependent on the Russian gas and stuff like that? Thank you.
I already said many times, and I would repeat again what I said many times, I'm very skeptical about sanctions. Just in principle, I have not seen in the history of sanctions that any aggressor, whoever that aggressor was, Saddam Hussein or family Kim or Iran or whoever, would change its behavior. Just I haven't seen any some kind of convincing example of the effectiveness of sanctions. Especially because all those countries are much smaller compared to Russia. They have much less diversified economies than Russia. It's quite clear that all world would not participate in sanctions. There will be many other countries, even as we see, Europe is not very willing to participate in those sanctions. But even Europe and the United States would participate, many other countries would not. So that is why those sanctions, even if they would be some kind of adopted, would be implemented, would have any substantial effect compared to what we have seen in history. But unfortunately, even those type of sanctions have never been neither implemented but not even discussed, because those sanctions, so-called sanctions, so-called three waves, it's impossible to talk about them in a serious manner, because it just those sanctions against few people and few companies do not affect to any extent situation, whatever, economic, political, or any other in Russia. Moreover, those sanctions are some kind of contributing maybe to the case that Russian regime is presented to the population. They think, okay, look at this West. They're trying to produce harm. They're trying to stop us. Even those sanctions are not effective, they're using in propaganda. So that is why I thought from the very first days, that I thought that probably one particular type of sanctions could be effective in this particular case. It's something like freezing of foreign exchange assets of the Russian Federation in the United States, in Europe, from the very beginning. In such sanctions, they should participate United States, they should participate Europe, it should participate Federal Reserve, European Central Bank, and should be done immediately in the late February or early March year 2014. If Russian regime would find itself without foreign exchange reserves, almost that time was close to $600 billion US, it would be rather hard to have any aggressive policy against neighbors. But since that policy, those sanctions have not been implemented that time, and they still are not being discussed, even not mentioned in any serious conversations. So Russian entities, including Russian Central Bank, withdraw their assets from United States and from Europe. So that is why it's too late.
Do you want to say that the European Union is having a blind eye on the issue? Why they're not discussing these sanctions?
All right, that's a long story. So why some Europeans, some kind of taking those positions, because there are different Europeans. There are some Europeans like Václav Klaus. It's one type of Europeans. Another type is Angela Merkel. Another type is François Hollande, who is still ready and actually going to to sell Mistral to Russia. As one of the political analysts has used to say, okay, just to send Mistral right now to Russia is like to send a barbed wire to Auschwitz. Okay, it's his words, okay, but it's understanding. Ukraine does not receive actually any armament, any weapons, neither from Europe nor from the United States. They only defensive, like helmets, like some kind of life. Yes, just that's all. And some kind of maybe connection equipment. That's all.
I see two more questions, three more.
Aggressive equipment. It's a force to attack.
Прошу.
Do you believe that in this stage of this war it can still be stopped? And if not, when will it reach the stage 8, rule of surviving enemies?
I think any war can be stopped at any stage, even at this stage, if necessary resources should be applied. Certainly, in this case, resources of Ukraine is not enough. Ukraine is not a small country. It's a serious country, but due to the level of preparedness of Ukrainian military forces, of security forces, even with rising level of effectiveness, Ukraine is still unable to solve this problem in any foreseeable future, especially since there is a constant flow of militants and equipment and military warfare from Russia. And now there is a shooting of Ukrainian airplanes and Ukrainian units from the Russian territory. It's a situation in which it's impossible to win this battle, because Ukrainians cannot open fire, at least they did not receive this order, to open fire on the Russian territory, but the kind of Russian troops from the Russian territory are hitting the targets on the Ukrainian territory. So that is why I think Ukraine is occupying incredibly important role, both in the concept that is in the mind of Mr. Putin and the general staff, but also a very important place in the some kind of defensive position of the free world. And support of Ukraine of any kind is crucial, whether this war could be stopped at this stage or whether it have very negative, a very gruesome continuation in Ukraine and maybe beyond Ukraine.
Thank you. Valentinas and then Kaiminas.
Dėkoju labai, Valentinas.
Thank you, Valentinas Mazuronis, member of the European Parliament. First and foremost, I would like to express my gratitude for a very comprehensive presentation and for explaining of what a hybrid war means, which dates back much earlier than general population started noticing it. My question to you is as follows. Can we say that such war was started against Lithuania too?
All right. First of all, I would like to say that some kind of example of the so-called hybrid war or non-linear war has been employed in 1939, in 1940, against 3 Baltic states: Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. Finland, it was more standard, classical war. So they tried to use this diplomatic pressure and so on, but Finns started to resist. But for Baltic countries, it's exactly the same way. So that is why the enormous diplomatic pressure, forcing Baltic governments to locate military bases on their territories. After that, the massive movement of Russian troops that used civilian clothes, as we remember, to present themselves as peaceful demonstrators on the streets of Vilnius, on the streets of Kaunas, of Riga, of Tallinn, and so on. So that is why it was certainly underdeveloped that time. That's the first try, but the approach was exactly the same, so using different methods, which was also important in this non-conventional warfare, that there is no limits, there is no borders, and there is no rules. Okay, war is not something nice and not something pleasant, but there are some rules of the war, and there are some conventions and agreements of international character, how war should be performed and how they should not be performed. What is important here that this non-conventional, unconventional, or non-linear war is such that there is no any rules, because if, for example, the delegation of Russian Orthodox Church is bringing some the spies in the delegation that is doing reconnaissance missions, what particular installment should be taken and how? What should you do? What should you do with the highest hierarchs from the Russian Orthodox Church? It's something that we have not dealing with, at least at such scale before. So what we have seen, so just until recently, for example, this information war, the crucial element, one of the most important elements of this non-linear war. This information war has been targeted, first of all, for the Russian population, I mean the population of Russian Federation. After that, it spread to neighboring countries, to Ukraine, to Belarus, to Baltic countries, to countries of Central Asia, to countries of South Caucasus. Now, it's actually not now, it's already several years, it moved to Central Europe. I've been recently to Slovakia, and Slovaks, I think, it's just absolutely, they just don't know what to do with that. Because all these social networks are being occupied by all these Russian slang, vatniki, or some kind of the members of these units of information troops who are participating in these debates and creating an impression for anyone who would participate or who would look into this debates or comments. They create this massive, absolute majority in comments, and that is why it would create an impression that, okay, majority of people who participate in this before very intelligent, very high professional discussion, the majority, 95%, are all those vatnikis. And that's actually impact on psychology of participants. Not only very strong people, I mean psychologically strong people could participate in such debate. Because majority of people, and especially it's concerning the females, so because there is attack and personal attacks, and especially attacks of very low level, so they would not participate in it because it's very humiliating to receive such responses, and that is why they just, okay, no, I will not participate in it. I will not write. I will not comment. And they departing, leaving the field, the battlefield, to the aggressor. And that's the purpose of this campaign. Because the purpose is to, first of all, to produce psychological impression that you are in absolute minority, that you have some kind of very strange views that are not shared by no one. And that is why, and especially some kind of as a personal attack, so just I would not participate. And after that, okay, look, here, there, just I'm alone. Maybe I'm not right, maybe I'm wrong, and they are right. And that is why at least they achieve this, at least neutrality in this psychological and informational warfare. And now they moved from Central Europe to Western Europe and to the United States. They hired a lot of native speakers in English, in French, in German, in Italian, in Spanish, and they actively participating exactly in the same style. So that is why it is not some kind of limited to a particular region. It's a really world warfare.
Richardas Šekutis from Journal Magazine Respublika. I have a question to you. From what everything has started, to your opinion, how do you assess the position of the US and the Western Europe with regards to the occupation of Crimea? In fact, there was no position with regard to Crimea. Does that mean that the Crimea has been given as a gift to Russia, or we have already are in the position when occupation of sovereign territories is considered as a normal practice?
All right, this is a very painful story because annexation of Crimea was, as we all know, the first time of annexation in Europe since 1945. Forceful, with a violation of all norms of international law, of Helsinki Act, of the Charter of the United Nations, of number of international agreements, bilateral between Russia and Ukraine, multilateral, including Budapest Memorandum, and many others. So that is why it was expected that such some kind of rude violation of international norm will have a very strong some kind of condemnation from everybody, and certainly from Europe, first of all, and from the United States. Unfortunately, it was clear that neither Europe nor United States were able to produce anything that would be considered even by neutral observers as something serious, and definitely not by Mr. Putin and by Kremlin. Even very strong statements with condemnation of, for example, of keeping South Ossetia and Abkhazia, then when was particular resolution have been adopted by European Parliament or by OECD or whatever, just Mr. Putin, according to conversation with Mr. Saakashvili, thought, okay, just forget about this. To put it in a very polite way, so he used slightly different words. So, but here we did not have even such a condemnation of the annexation of Crimea in this particular case. And I'm sure that in this case we cannot, or I mean the world cannot limit itself to only condemnation. I already said just back in February and early March, if Mr. Obama would behave in late February and early March as Mr. Bush Jr. behaved on August 11th, year 2008, so the whole annexation of Crimea probably would not happen. It is very important, and it's a duty, this is a responsibility of just really very few persons. In this particular case, only Mr. Obama could make a change if he would act very, very fast and very, very decisively. He did not do neither that time. Moreover, he said absolutely opposite to what that could produce any impact on Mr. Putin's behavior. Mr. Obama said at that time, we are not going to use troops in any regard, in any way. So it has been considered by Kremlin as an invitation to continue aggression against Crimea, against eastern Ukraine, and he repeated several times. So that's, at some points, we rely on institutions in the Western world, legal institutions, democratic institutions, representative institutions, but at some point, especially at crucial points, at points of crisis, the role of individuum is crucial, as it was in the case of Mr. Winston Churchill, in case of Mr. Ronald Reagan, in case of Margaret Thatcher. It's impossible to avoid. This is a crucial role of individual in time of crisis.
Danijos ambasadoris, prašau.
Thank you. Extremely interesting and somewhat scaring presentation, or very scaring. I would have liked to put you a series of questions, but I will limit myself to one. The Malaysian airplane. I understand it is almost a fact that it was Russian regular forces which shot down the plane. What was the target and has it been achieved? The Russians, they would have preferred that it was believed it was preferably the Ukrainians who did it, or at least the separatists, or even if they knew it might be revealed they did it themselves. Has that hurt them? I mean, and I would say, as far as I can judge, the element of sympathy which might have been for the separatists have totally disappeared. In the Western world, at least, there's no sympathy whatsoever. In Ukraine, also, I definitely no expert, but my feeling is that the Russians have lost the war of minds in Ukraine. They might be increasing the military pressure and subversion and so on, but if you take the shooting down the airplane in particular, but also the war in general, have the Russians succeeded? Thank you.
May I answer, or try to answer your question with such a comparison? What do you think Mr. Bashar Assad won more sympathies when he used chemical weapons against civilians and killed thousands of them, or not? We would probably agree that he did not get any particular sympathy around the world. And actually it's only confirmed and some kind of strengthened his some kind of status, his position as a kind of a horrible dictator who is killing own citizens, right? Something similar can be said in this case. Regardless what is viewed towards separatists around the world, the target, the implied target of this attack was to produce pressure in European capitals on their governments, on European governments, that they, in their turn, would produce pressure on Mr. Poroshenko and on the Ukrainian authorities to stop war in eastern Ukraine at any cost. Whatever happened there, we are not interested what is going on there in eastern Ukraine. We do not want that our citizens would be killed with terrorist attacks. So that is why Mr. Poroshenko stopped this war right now. We do not care much what's going on there, but war should be stopped right now. So the purpose of Mr. Putin, the kind of long-term purpose, his purpose in this particular case, he understands that it's rather hard to occupy the whole Ukraine, and it could be very ineffective. What is important, not to allow Ukraine to join Western alliances, both economic and security ones. If there is a big so-called Transnistria in the eastern part of Ukraine, if there is always some kind of provocation, some kind of clashes, some kind of terrorist acts and so on, and if these so-called big Transnistria in terms of Donetsk, Lugansk, People's Republics or whatever, or Novorossiya, so it is quite clear that Ukraine cannot join on full scale any European institutions until this issue can be solved. And as we have seen it already in the cases of Abkhazia, South Ossetia, Transnistria, it can last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, endlessly. And this is the purpose of Mr. Putin. Not to allow Ukraine to leave the sphere of privileged interests. So that is why what people would think about separatists, he doesn't care. He doesn't care, and looks like, to my mind, what we see, those who followed all this intercepted conversation with separatists, it was quite clear. They did know what are they hitting. So actually not they hitting, because they were only providing the some kind of the defense or protection for the system. But the system itself was managed by the Russian staff. And when all these people, whatever, Besler or whoever, when they reporting to them, reporting to their high authorities or the kind of to their kind of coordinators, it's quite clear they did know what is going on. And for him, it was quite a shock. And actually, you can hear by his words that for him it's quite a shock that it was a passenger jet hit, even for that separatist. So, which actually another indication that all the separatists, and actually this group was under his command, so-called, even he himself didn't know what particular target has been hit by missile, which once again indication that he himself, the highest commander under whom this system, the book system was, he didn't have anything with choosing the target, with following the target, with the called enlightening the target, when this kind of missile moving this to this 10 kilometers high altitude. So just he is not in charge of that, but he was presented as a guilty side, as a guilty party. And for Mr. Putin, it's fine. It's exactly what he did with South Ossetians. He presented them in all these attacks on Georgians in South Ossetia in July, in August, year 2008, as a guilty party. It's exactly the same style.
Thank you, Professor. I am the Italian ambassador in Lithuania. I have two questions. One, after your speech, it's clear that President Obama is silent. The Europeans are divided and weak. Sanctions are not effective because not taken in the due time and stronger sanctions. Russian opposition is also weak, very weak and divided. And Putin is also looking to China because there is an agreement in gas, there is an agreement to create a financial bank in order to avoid IMF. So which is your therapy? What the West must do? You mentioned Churchill, Reagan and Madame Thatcher. We have also to mention the reaction in the Euro missile crisis in the year 85 when we put the Euro missile in Germany, Italy, Netherlands, that bring to the collapse of the Soviet Union. Which is your therapy? What we have to do? And secondly, you work until 9 years ago with Mr. Putin. How you can describe him? He's from the method, the psychological method. He's an autocrat, or he listens to his advisor. He involves the others. Which kind of personality is it? Because you stay in the same table for taking big decision in economic field 10 years ago. Thank you.
All right. Okay. As your first question concerning therapy, I already tried to some kind of provide my recipe to the question of the lady, just with the at least main 4 points. I can repeat them again. I think that's crucial for me, as once again, as non-military expert, because probably a military person would provide some additional points that would be relevant to military sphere. But I would probably stress one more point that I already mentioned here, that at this moment, Ukraine is crucial. What Mr. Obama said in the beginning of June in Warsaw, and in some other speeches in Warsaw, in Brussels, and maybe to some extent, I don't know, maybe not in France, but in Warsaw when he met with Polish authorities and with representatives of Baltic countries as well. So he introduced rather serious program, including military component, of strengthening the Central European countries, strengthening military capacity of Baltic countries, strengthening military capacity of Poland, Romania. He also said publicly, which is very important, that Article 5 of the NATO Charter is valid for each member of the alliance. And he said it not only as a general principle, but also he mentioned each country, that would be no misinterpretation of his words, which is very important because before, for some time, there was a big debate and big discussion whether Article 5 of the Charter is applicable right now and under which particular circumstances. It's good, but it's not enough. First of all, it's good for the current members of NATO that their defense and their protection are strengthened. No doubt, it's good. But at this moment, war is waged against Ukraine. Ukraine is not a member of NATO. And Ukraine is under very serious attack, under attack of total non-linear war through all these directions. And Ukraine so far did not receive and does not receive very substantial support of any kind from NATO, from US, from Europe, whatever. Just even this, some kind of not lethal equipment, some kind of defensive equipment, and only United States started to send to Ukraine at the very end of June, not before that. So, but for the issue whether this war will be translated into the next stage, what is important defense not of, with all due respect, of Poland, but defense of Ukraine. Defense of Poland might become very important if defense of Ukraine will not be successful. My suggestion would be to provide all necessary for defense of Ukraine. And the sooner the better. If you read the publications of these so-called separatists or Novorossiya or these Russian some kind of imperialist movements, they're openly saying it is crucially important that this Novorossiya would continue for another few weeks. If they would continue for a few weeks until some kind of beginning of autumn, so they will be saved. They do not clarify what exactly they have in mind, whether it will be some kind of change in weather, a change in attitudes, or some kind of massive intervention from the Russian troops, or whatever. Just they do not specify. But this is a kind of, it's becoming like a mantra that you need to withstand another few weeks. And if you would withstand those few weeks, so that is why everything will be, there will be victory. Certainly, it's necessary to understand what they have in mind, but each day or each week of this enclave of separatists or this Novorossiya is definitely playing against Ukraine. The sooner this issue will be solved, the better. It's quite clear. So that is why my suggestion would be to everybody to provide all necessary support to Ukraine in all possible forms, that this problem would be solved the sooner the better. As for your second question, I have a rule not to comment on personal issues of Mr. Putin due to understandable reasons. I did work with him for 6 years, almost for 6 years, and I don't feel myself comfortable to comment on some kind of personal issues. I did comment when I was working in Kremlin, and I comment after I resigned from this position on political issues. And I had that privilege before, and I continue this approach right now. So if you would like to ask me about political issues, and the war is definitely a political issue, I'm happy to respond, but I'm not in a position to comment on these personal issues.
Prieš perduodamas dar paskutiniam ko gero klausimui.
Before we give the floor to the last question in row number 4, I will read out a question from internet. Boris Berg, a military expert, asks, why when I presented Mr. Illarionov, highlighted the fact he was an advisor to Mr. Putin in the past. Maybe it was because Mr. Illarionov is smart, of which I'm sure, or maybe this was done in order to highlight that Putin lacked smart advice to explain why Illarionov worked there. I was quoting Wikipedia, I would like to say, and we are not in a position to correct the information in Wikipedia. In the past few weeks, Russia tried to correct some of the facts on the story about the Boeing 777, the Malaysian airplane, in Wikipedia. I don't know if Mr. Илларионов wants to add any comment on that, on the Wikipedia inscription.
What you said in Lithuania.
The question comes as, in my introductory remarks, I said as Mr. Illarionov was the former advisor to Mr. Putin some 9 years ago. Then he resigned, and the question comes as following. Why did I make this remark, that you were the former advisor to Mr. Putin? Is that for demonstration as Mr. Putin was not really in position to rule without such a prominent advisor, or you, or to show that you were very smart and vigorous to advise Mr. Putin? In fact, I myself, I didn't understand the question.
But seems to me the question to you.
It is to me more, or to Wikipedia. I wish, Mr. Berg begins the discussion, the bilateral discussion with Wikipedia. You made the explanation in a reply before. Then, ketvirta eilė, prašau.
Parliamentary Scrutiny Department, Lukošaitis. You have you had said about the legality of the terms of office of Putin. Did you learn about legal estimations of the war in Ukraine? Is it not a legal crime?
If I understand correctly, your question, it was whether aggression against Ukraine legal or crime. Seems to me aggression, according to the United Nations Charter, according to many documents, is one of the most serious crimes in international relations. It's by definition, and those who prepared and conducted aggression against other nations are some kind of criminals. And those actually who tried to do it in recent years, I would mention Mr. Hussein, Saddam, or Mr. Milosevic, some kind of ended their days as we know how they ended their days. So that is why it cannot be any different description of what is going on right now against Ukraine and against Georgia. I would repeat again, we are dealing not with the first aggression, we are dealing with second aggression against the independent nation. But if we would be we would try to scratch our memory, we would find that in year 2010 there was attempt to repeat very similar aggression against Kyrgyzstan with use of the Russian paratroopers as peacekeepers in Osh Valley of Kyrgyzstan, when also the clashes have been instigated by the Russian subversive actions and so on. And in all two previous cases, in the case of Russian-Georgian war and the case of the Russian intervention in Kyrgyzstan, fortunately was not such a full scale as it was in Russian-Georgian case, in the Russian-Ukrainian case. But in those first two cases, the aggression has been stopped by intervention of very serious international forces. As I mentioned already, on August 11th, year 2012, Mr. Bush has announced that if Russia would continue these aggressive actions against Georgia, so it would be a very different response. And the same night, the U.S. Navy moved to the Black Sea, and the U.S. Air Force started to be relocated to the Romanian and Turkish air bases. Next day, Mr. Medvedev ordered to stop Russian tanks rolling towards Tbilisi. In year 2010, when Russian paratroopers some kind of landed in Osh Valley of Kyrgyzstan, Chinese made a special statement that they do not tolerate such an intervention into internal affairs of Kyrgyzstan. A couple of days later, Russian paratroopers have been withdrawn from Kyrgyzstan. It's probably some indications of what type of actions from international community could produce necessary impression on a behavior of aggressor.
Thank you, Andrei, very much. And my very last question would be, again, from received by internet. Is that possible to have peacekeeping cooperation of EU in Ukraine?
It's better to ask EU.
Ačiū. Aš norėčiau padėkoti.
Thank you. On behalf of all of us, I would like to extend a sincere gratitude to Mr. Andrei Illarionov for his excellent presentation, for his in-depth answers to our questions. And I do really believe that our awareness of the hybrid warfare and the methods of its implementation in Eastern Europe has increased thanks to you. We now have a better view of the events, and on behalf of all of us, I would like to thank Mr. Illarionov for having come here to Lithuania in summer on a vacation period, for having come here to debate this matter with us. I am grateful indeed, and I hope this is not his last visit to Lithuania in the near future. We will soon meet each other in other formats, and I wish Mr. Illarionov and his family to have a great visit to Lithuania, and to him as an analyst, I hope he will remain a person who has the analytical capability to relate facts and demonstrate the rules and matters behind it. I wish you every success and hope I will see you in many other places. Last word is to you, Mr. Andrei.
Thank you, everybody, for coming here and participating in this discussion. I would like only to say a word here in conclusion. What we're dealing right now, it is not some kind of one event that will go away at dawn. It is a very long-term problem, and it will not go away by itself. It can go away only if combined efforts of international community, of those countries that have already been affected and that are not affected to such an extent, would be really combined to address this problem. And the final solution to this problem, final victory, can be achieved only when Russia will become democratic. And I would ask you to just to think about that. I understand that everybody has own agenda, has own problems everywhere, and this is considered to be some kind of another country. But unfortunately, some people in that country can produce a lot of problems for the outside world. So that is why I would invite everybody to think how to achieve the situation of peace in the world, in Europe, and democracy in Russia altogether. Thank you very much for coming here.